Welcome to Recovery Uncovered, your all things recovery podcast. Recovery Uncovered is produced by MHAB Enterprises, a division of the Northeast Group of Companies located right here in Plattsburgh, New York. I'm your host, Mike Carpenter.
Affectionately known as MHAB Mike, and I'm your co-host, Betsy Vicencio.
Affectionately known as BV the Normie. We have one goal in these podcasts, and that's not to suck. Thanks for tuning in. Good morning, everybody. I'm Mike Carpenter, affectionately known as MHAB Mike, and I am your host of Recovery Uncovered. This is my sidekick, Betsy Vicencio, also known as BV the Normie. But we are going to change BV the Normie because there's nothing about you that's normal. I decided on my way in today. And I want to tell you that we're a half hour late starting our podcast today because in typical Betsy fashion, she arrived late to the studio and then decided that she didn't like the setup of the chairs. So we spent 20 minutes moving the chair. Are you comfortable now? Is it good?
I'm so much better now. So a couple of things. Number one, you're the one that affectionately named me BV the Normie. So that one on you. So if you want to change it, more power to you.
Okay.
Number two, team, this is the absolute first time I've ever shown up late. I've been here 8:30 on the dot, part of the setup team, and with my apology, this is our normal configuration. I apologize. I like a little consistency, and I like to be close to you.
Okay, let's poll the audience. Telly Schwartz, has Betsy ever been late to a meeting that you're at?
No comment. I plead the fifth.
Bryn Judkins, has Betsy ever been late to a meeting?
I also plead.
Whatever. All right. Unless you pay him today. So we have a kind of a fun podcast today, and if you've been here for the first few episodes that we've done, you've heard me pick on Betsy a lot about one of her daughters who struggled with addiction and got into recovery, and I've constantly blamed Betsy for that addiction. And today we're going to hear the truth that it really is Betsy's fault when her daughter tells her. Let's hope. So our very special guest today is Bridget Murnane.
Hi.
Wave to everybody. Say hello.
Hello.
So I want to tell you a quick story about the family and how the world works, in my opinion, and fate and things like that. You know, I have known Bridget for 16 years, and I've known the family for probably a hell of a lot longer than that. And although don't necessarily know your father, I know your younger sister's father and played hockey with him when we were kids. So it's almost like I've been in the family like all of your lives. And when your mom came to work for us, I got to know you a little bit and your younger sister, and I got to watch you kind of grow up and go through high school and all of that stuff. And then I got to see, you know, the ugly sides of what addiction does, and then I got to see I actually got to be a part of your the beginning of your recovery, which was really a treat. And I'll tell a personal story about that a little later on. But so with all that said, welcome to our podcast, and we're glad that you're here.
Thank you both for having me. Very excited to be here.
And so let's start with, give us a little background information. Tell us who Bridget Murnane actually is.
Ooh, Bridget Murnane from back then, Bridget Murnane middle, or Bridget Murnane now?
Well, I guess we'll start with Bridget Murnane back then. Tell us a little bit about Bridget Murnane back then.
So I was born and raised in Plattsburgh. My parents divorced at a super, super young age, when I was at a super young age, so I was about 1.
Told you it was your fault.
Yep.
There we go.
You know, my mother
Check.
didn't stay in a really toxic relationship. Shame on her.
Yes, well said.
And
Bridge.
You're welcome. Love you. You heard the toxic part though, right?
I
gave you some
did,
credit there.
and I got the sarcasm too. So I really legitimately said thank you for.
We certainly believe that the reason Betsy was late today was she really didn't want to come. She figured
Agreed.
she was just going to sit here and we were going to tear her apart, which we're really not going to do.
I may have had a little anxiety around this. I'm not gonna lie. You know, hanging on for dear life. Sorry.
So how were your younger days? Give me some recollections of what it was like being a child growing up in Plattsburgh, New York.
So we were talking about it earlier. I don't really have a memory earlier than 7 years old. from what I'm told. I do know that I lived in New Jersey for a part of that time. I do remember some really shitty things happening at that point. And then at 7 years old, my father took my mother to court, and my father got full custody. So I moved from New Jersey back up to Plattsburgh to live with my father. And that was really when my memories started to really come together. I don't know if that's because of like the trauma that had happened in my life, that I just had completely gotten rid of those first 7 years, or that my brain just wasn't fully developed. I don't know what the reason is. But you know, I grew up in a Catholic family, went to church every Saturday. We didn't go Sundays. Sunday was for other things. Went to a Catholic school, elementary, middle school, and high school, graduated, was an altar server. You know, grew up in a really Catholic family with this structure, with this idea of what a person should be, what a good person was. At one point in my life, I believed that I wanted to be a nun.
I remember that.
And I would say all of the lines that the priest would say during Mass, and I was so proud. And I don't know if that's because I constantly needed acceptance from my family, because I always felt really different. I don't know what that was. And then I remember I decided I no longer wanted to be a part of the Catholic Church because women couldn't be priests. And I said, that's bullshit. If I want to be a priest, I am just as good at saying this as this guy up here.
Right.
Like, why can I not be a priest?
Have they changed that now? Can women be priests in the Catholic Church?
Not in the
still?
Catholic
Cannot.
Church.
Maybe I
Other
should become a
denominations,
Catholic.
yeah.
You want to become a Catholic?
No, not anymore. I was years ago, so no, I'm not doing.
You're
I'm
going to
not
go
doing
back
that.
just so that you can live in the world where women can't be leaders?
So you just made a comment that you didn't feel like you fit in or something like that. Would you say that that's a recollection of you when you were young?
Yeah.
You know, it's so funny. I have talked to, and you and I know each other really well and have had lots of conversations about recovery, and that seems to be just one of those things that's so common in all of us. And it's not that we can't fit in. Like, I remember watching you, going to watch you play soccer and basketball, and you had friends and you were pretty well adjusted, but it's the feeling inside. It's not the fact that we can't do those things. It's that feeling inside. Is that?
We can appear like we fit in. We can fit in everywhere. I find that people who suffer from alcoholism and addiction, we can adjust to wherever we are because we're survivors, and that's what we do. We do what we can in order to survive in whatever situation we're in. And I think we all do that from a really young age, But I think if we look deep down in those times, like I really had no idea where I was supposed to be.
What did you think when she was growing up in those kind of early days, and then as she got into be a young teenager? What kind of?
Yeah.
I mean, on top of the fact that you were a lousy mother, what do
Yeah.
you? What
There's
kind
that.
of do you?
There's so, to Bridget's story, and it saddens me that she doesn't have memory of those early years, because for me, she and I were kind of this little team of. We were this little team. We had a little routine of things we did. You were right. Your dad and I divorced young, and we kind of had our own little things that we did. I mean, we spent Sundays. We visited every possible Adirondack lake, and I felt like we had this really great thing that happened, and it was incredibly traumatic when you were 7.5 years old and suddenly you were gone.
How much older are you than Santana?
6 years.
So that's interesting that you for the first 6 years you only had one child.
Yep.
And you had her.
Yep. And so after Bridget went to live with her dad, it was funky. First, for a period of time, I was still living out of the area, so I would come up virtually every weekend or every other weekend to spend time with Bridget, and was really trying to manage kind of my own situation with that change with Santana. A couple of those years were really, really, really wonky. But Bridget was just, she's always been a great kid. She was so gregarious from the time she was really young. I mean, she had such a great command of language. She talked when she was young. She walked when she was young. I mean, she just was always just this really vibrant child that just loved people, and she was, and you watched her as she grew, and I think that, the personal challenges, that whole kind of dynamic between her dad and I'm sure fostered some really funky and odd feelings. She became a lot more emotional, probably as a result of all of those all of those really curious dynamics, and I think trying to figure out where, where you belonged. And we went through multiple times where I think you wanted to come and come home to live with us, and that you felt better there many times, and yet you were always challenged with trying to keep everybody in your families plural, happy. You didn't want to disappoint anybody.
So you have two daughters. You have Bridget and Santana, who's 6 years younger than you, and I love your daughters equally. I've watched them both grow up. They're terrific, but Bridget's always been my favorite, and we all know that Santana's always been your favorite, right? Okay. We all know that. Even Santana knows it. She knows, like, she's the favorite. So I said, that's fine. I'm taking the more screwed up one. Bridget's my favorite. I'm there for you.
I need to be somebody's favorite. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I've told both of my children independently that they're both my favorite. I mean, good
You have
God.
never told me that.
Yes, we kind of expected that. So tell me when the drug use or addiction started, and I'm assuming for you it probably started like it does for a lot of kids, cigarettes, booze, pot, and then moved on.
Yeah, so I smoked pot for the first time when I was probably 13 years old. It wasn't a daily thing, wasn't even a monthly thing. I had tried it and I was like, okay, yeah, this is cool, this works for me. I was 14 or 15 and I got drunk with my best friend and our other friend one night, and that was super fun, and I was like, oh yeah, that was kind of cool. I think when I was 15, I had torn my ACL, my MCL, and meniscus in basketball, and so I had to have surgery to replace all of that, and I was prescribed, oxycodone, so it's like 5 milligrams of oxy and then the rest is Tylenol or whatever. And I started taking those and I was like, oh, this is really nice. I'm really enjoying this. This is kind of, this relaxes me. I feel like just at ease. There was no anxiety. There was no pressure from the outside world. It just felt calm. Obviously, at 15 years old, I didn't know where to get any of those. So once they were gone, they were gone. Thankfully, when I was 17, I tore my other ACL, MCL, meniscus. And so then that whole process started over again. Right around that time, my mom got cancer. And so once my prescription ran out, I was looking through all the medicine cabinets because I was a little older. I was like, oh, this is where we keep this stuff, medicine cabinets. And I found my mother's prescription, which was a little stronger than mine, and I was taking those on a daily basis most of my junior year. And then once those ran out, I started going through withdrawals, and I really didn't know what they were. I just thought I didn't feel well. But once they were gone, at that point, they were still gone. I was from a small town.
Were you drinking and doing pot and recreational drugs at the same time, too?
Probably by 17. I wasn't drinking on a regular basis, but I was smoking on a semi-regular basis. But I was a 3-sport athlete, and I was really afraid that if I ever got drug tested or anything like that, it wasn't consistent enough at that point in my life because I had all these other things that, quote unquote, brought me joy that I didn't want to give up at that point.
Right. Would you say that it's interesting that you're kind of you're a little different than a lot of addicts in that they get it one way or the other. Like they either go through the way that I did, conventional way, start drinking, smoking pot and then cocaine and it moves on. Or other people get it where they never did drugs and then they started taking oxy or something like that as a pain medication and got hooked. You're almost a split of those. You started doing the recreational stuff and that was, okay, not great. And then you had the injury and you got oxy and you're like, wow, this makes me feel really, really good. Mm-hmm. So what happened out? I mean, you graduated high school, you went to college, you were a pretty well-adjusted, normal kid for the most part.
Yeah, on the outside, mentally, I don't think I was well-adjusted at all. But I went to college. I started smoking pot on a regular basis, daily, several times. I had worked that whole summer, saved up a bunch of money to go to college just for, fun or whatever. Within my first 2 months, I had blown through several $1,000s. And so then I remember I was sitting in this park that we used to go to and smoke pot. And there's a video of it somewhere because I had a camera and I must have accidentally hit record, and it recorded this hour-long conversation with my friend. And I said, you know what, I would really love to try all of the drugs in the world to know that I would be satisfied with just smoking pot. That very weekend, I tried a multitude of drugs. I think it was cocaine, Molly, a couple other things, and then after that I was off and running. there was no stopping what
Did
was
you have
going
one
on.
that you liked more than anything, or was it were you just a garbage head like a lot of us, just whatever you could get your hands on?
Garbage head?
Garbage
Just whatever-
disposal, yeah.
Yeah, whatever you can get your hand, we're using whatever. It doesn't really matter. We're just using whatever we can find.
So can I, before, and with an apology, can I just ask, there was a point in time I remember where after you had gone to college and you came home and you were talking about smoking pot and you got a little bit like indignant and self-righteous and you're like, I'm a pot smoker, I'm a proud pot smoker, and you're just gonna have to learn to accept it because this is who I am. And I mean, I remember this conversation and I'm going,
You were a little judgy.
yeah,
You were a little judgy.
A little judgy.
and I'm like, I don't know. Well, I didn't know that I agreed with that as, for a host of reasons, some things that I had seen and people I had watched kind of try to be daily pot smokers and some of the challenges that their life had. And I struggled with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Was there anything before you got really, really heavily into it, and we'll talk a bit about that your mom or a warning sign or something that somebody could have done? I always ask and I'll tell you why I asked this. I asked myself that question because people have asked me, like, what could we have done differently for you? And I will tell you that unless for me you had started to help me when I was really, really, really young, like maybe 3, 4, 5 years old, with the anxiety and the sensitivity and the lack of fitting in, I don't think at 10 or 11 or 12 or 13 there were many things anybody could have done for me that would have had my life go in a different direction. Do you feel the same way, or?
So I don't believe that there's anything at any point in my life that anybody could have done to change the way that my life turned out. If I would have made different choices in my life, maybe, but there was no intervention from other people that I think could quote unquote prevent my life from happening the way it is. And that's something I have to come to terms with my own daughter. Yep. She is the daughter of 2 people who are thankfully both in recovery now, but both were heroin addicts. And I have to come to the terms with the fact that there may be nothing I can do aside from love her, support her, that's going to keep her from potentially going down this path. Because I don't think there was anything anyone could have done.
So what we've just done there is I've taken my 30 seconds to give you a reprieve from blaming you for your daughter's addiction, all right? So, but now we're going to go back to holding you accountable. But I did, just so you know, I did do something nice for you today.
So you laid the foundation that said there was nothing I could have done different or better that could have stopped this freight
I'll
train.
tell you after all the things you could have done differently. But
Jerk.
So it accelerated pretty quickly for you. You got to be pretty bad. So walk us through a bit of the kind of, not necessarily the war stories because we don't want to reminisce, but walk me through how bad it actually got for you over the next few years.
So my freshman year is when everything kind of took off. I started just taking all the drugs I possibly could. Obviously, I found opiates. Those were the love of my life. I was drinking on a daily basis, smoking pot on a daily basis, taking any drug I could, especially if I could find opiates. I gained the freshman 15 my first semester. After I started doing drugs, I dropped probably 40, 50 pounds within 6 months. I attribute a lot of that to because like the serotonin in my brain I was getting from all these other substances, and I was majorly depressed and I just didn't eat, plus the drugs. So I came home from my freshman year of college and I moved in with my friends from high school because my mom was telling me like, oh, I think you're like not doing the best stuff, and I'm like, F you don't know my life, da 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 da. And I didn't want to live with my dad because he and I had a different relationship. And that summer, all of my friends started using like I did, and I was like, oh, this is great. We were getting high every night. We were having such a great time. And I think that's when things really, really went downhill. It's because not only did I have my people in Albany that used like I did, I had people up here that used like I did. And so over the next 3 years, it just continuously went downhill of my ability to keep up all the things I wanted to do. I'd had a job at a summer camp that I had loved, that I'd had for years. Because I was working at a bar and a pizza shop, I wasn't getting home till 4 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, I can get up and, go to camp. And I obviously couldn't because I was, using until I'd left. So I lost that job. And all of the things that I was able to do for a really long time, or what I thought was a really long time, in reality it was probably only a year or two. I couldn't do it. I couldn't hold down a job. Even at a bar, I couldn't hold down a job. And how hard is it to pour a rum and Coke, I couldn't.
Well, when you're drinking them on the side, it becomes difficult.
And I couldn't hold down a job. The job that I had right before I went to rehab is I could make pizza. And it wasn't even really pizza. I was making the salads and the chicken wings. but I couldn't hold down a job. You know, I couldn't do all of the things that I had done before. So my life went downhill within a matter of 4 years. Things got really bad to the point that I couldn't do anything.
Did you have any overdoses? Any Narcans? Were
Yes.
you Narcan back? How many times?
Twice.
Twice. That's not a ton for somebody that was as heavily involved as you. Criminal activity, get involved in anything you probably shouldn't have?
Probably.
Yeah.
I don't know what the statute of limitations is on any of this stuff,
We're going to leave it at, I don't think you ever got arrested, though, did you?
I did get a DWI.
Oh, that's right.
yeah,
That's
when,
right. I do remember that.
oh God, I was just 21.
Yeah.
I need to find that mugshot because I was dressed as a Ninja Turtle because it was Halloween. And I'd really like to see that now.
I think I do I remember this. Yes, exactly.
But I did get a DWI when I was 21, and that wasn't super great. Mom was crying when she came to pick me up at the jail. Thankfully, they didn't put me in the cell. The judge did say to me, though, when I went for my arraignment afterwards, he's like, "Oh, Miss Murnane, the most pleasant arraignment I've ever had at 4 a.m." So I always held that with me.
You were very nice to him.
I was
You
very
were
pleasant.
very-
Yeah. Well, just because I, used drugs didn't mean I didn't respect authority when I know I needed to.
When you knew you needed to. I like that. Betsy, when did we start talking about her having a problem?
18.
Yeah, I think when she was going off to college and,
I think
there
we were worried about, there were some signs there that you
Yeah.
and I were kind of
we were talking about Albany and, hanging out in Washington Park and you always did this thing with, your kid's gonna be a freaking addict. You just wait and see, you fucked her up. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, there was always that kind of little bit of sarcastic, but I think it was, I think there were these conversations where I began to go, man, I'm really worried that things are just not going well. And I remember the summer that you came and she rented one of our apartments downtown, and it got really wonky when I got a phone call from her roommate that said, this has been going on, and then everything really kind of ratcheted up.
So we took you to rehab the first time, and I vaguely remember this, and I remember you tried to leave. We were at lunch, I think, over in St. Johnsbury, Vermont, right after we'd gone. I can't even remember if it was before or after we'd toured Valley Vista.
It was. So I don't remember lunch. I was 19. Lizzie had taken me to a meeting a couple weeks before because they're like, "You have a problem." I was like, "I don't have a fucking problem." But Lizzie took me to a meeting in Katyville, and I went and I sat through it because I was like, you know what? If this will get everybody off my back, I'll go and I'll sit through it. And then I had come home from college, and Betsy and Mike were like, "Oh, we're gonna take you. Let's go to lunch. Let's go to lunch in Vermont." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, let's go to lunch in Vermont." We didn't go to lunch in Vermont. They brought me to rehab and had me sit down for 2 hours with these people telling me, "Oh, well, if you don't, sounds like with the amount that you're using, you'll start to have detox right away." And I'm pretty sure I said to them, "Oh, don't worry, I have stuff in the car."
We didn't tell you we were taking you to rehab?
No, we
Really?
So we teased her up. I do remember this.
That's a great
Because you're
story.
like, listen, we're going to tell her we're going to take her to lunch in Vermont, and we're just going to go for a drive, and then we're just going to stop by Valley Vista. And we did go to lunch. We went to lunch first
I don't remember lunch.
and I'm trying to think, it was like a little diner
Yes,
type place.
it was.
Then we went to rehab, and she was in there for so long that we ended up going to dinner at that restaurant down by the water.
That's the
by Valley
one where
Vista.
she was so pissed off at
Oh,
us.
I
It
think-
was,
well-
yes, I think at dinner you were really angry
Well,
at us.
I think it might have been that she might have, you might have been withdrawing a little bit by that point. You had spent it was hours that she was in.
But didn't you go to rehab that first time?
No.
No.
So we only took you there, and then we came back.
You took me there in hopes that I would stay there. And I said, I'm like, all right, I'll sit here and I'll appease whatever's going on. But I was 19 at the time. Like, there was no way that I was even remotely ready.
So when was your first rehab then?
So they both happened within a matter of 4 months of each other.
Right.
I was 22. It was July. It was a Wednesday. And I was working at a pizza shop, and I was withdrawing really bad. I had zero money, and I'm like, I'm going to get really, really sick really, really soon. And so I called my mom, and I said, "Mom, I need help." I'm like, I'm ready to go whenever you want to take me. And she goes, "Well, let's go right now." I said, "Well, I have to finish work for the rest of the week. Let's go Friday." And that was the first time I went. We did end up going Friday. You and Mom both took me.
That's right. Yes. Okay. Okay. Right.
That was horrific. That entire trip was just I just remember crying the whole time, and I remember Mom holding my hand. I remember you letting me smoke cigarettes in your car. Thank you for that.
Didn't we? And I think we went and bought you a carton of cigarettes.
Yes,
I think
you did.
after we dropped you off at rehab, you only had like one pack, so we went and bought her a carton of
Yeah,
cigarettes
you
and
did.
brought them back to you at rehab. That's
did.
right. Yes, that's right. And you completed rehab that first time,
I did.
and you came
I
back.
sailed through it. I was so good.
Well,
I was so good. I did.
well,
I
you
think she did,
You made it. You made it to to that last week, and you were like, and you were.
I graduated that program. Don't take that from me.
That's right. And then you came back here.
And then I came back here. I had convinced my counselor, and I'm like, oh, my roommates are so supportive of my recovery. And like in my mind, they probably were. They just didn't know what that looked like.
Do you think at that time when you left rehab the first time that you even really wanted to remain clean, or was it more just, oh, I like how I feel, but I don't like, how did you feel when you left there that first time?
I knew I didn't want to shoot heroin anymore, but I wasn't prepared to give up pot, alcohol, and all the other fun stuff. Like, I knew I didn't want to shoot heroin anymore, but I didn't know that there was a difference. Like, I thought that I could drink and it would be okay. I thought that I could smoke pot and it would be okay.
You and Lizzie have so much in common, because one of the things that she says, because she got sober young like you, she said it was like, I didn't want to give up the fun. I was like, what am I going to do at this age? Like, if I don't, like, how am I going to get along with people? Like, this is what everybody does. It was very, you know what I mean? I don't want to destroy my life, but I want to be able to like have fun with my friends, kind of. So how long you weren't sober very long that time?
A couple hours.
Couple hours.
So
Nice.
so I
Solid.
remember
Love that.
Santana and I went to pick up Bridget from rehab, and so we went down to Valley Vista.
Can I just side point real quick? Santana knew that entire time that I was full of shit, even though I didn't.
Yeah.
Sorry, side point, go ahead.
No, I think it's profound, because Santana was always had an interesting awareness of you, and it worshipped you and had an interesting awareness. But we picked her up from rehab. We stopped in Burlington to have lunch. I have beautiful pictures of us walking down Church Street. She conned me into a new pair of Birkenstocks, because she's like, I did so good. I'm all better. My life is going to be great. Thanks for that. And we literally got home. We went to visit our cousins who were staying, and you literally left that visit.
You dropped me off at the house that I was living so I could get my car.
Yeah.
And
You
then
know,
we went to
it's
visit our
very
cousin.
interesting watching the dynamic between the two of you, because I'm close to my father now. My father was the one who brought me to rehab, and now when we tell stories, the perspective, like the substance of the story is the same. We all know, but the nuances of the stories are different. He'll tell me things, and I'll be like, that is not the way that I remember it. Like, I remember it differently. And he'll be like, no, I'm sure that it happened this way. So it's just interesting that's perspective is, different. So over the next few months, it got real bad for you.
Yeah, it was 3 weeks. It was 3 weeks. Things got really, really bad again. I hawked my car for $100. One of my overdoses was during that time. I didn't sleep for one whole week, and I remember going into severe hallucinations. I wasn't paying my rent, obviously. At that point, I'm pretty sure I had stolen everything from my family that I could at that point. I think I was just hustling to figure out how to pay for what I needed, but things went downhill really quick. Within 3 weeks, shit was worse than it was when I went in.
And you were still living here in Plattsburgh.
I was still living here in Plattsburgh. I was living at an apartment on Couch Street, Clinton Street.
I
can't
remember it well.
remember.
So there were a few events that happened, like right before I took you to rehab that second time. Didn't you and Santana go down there and I love this story. What happened?
After you told her not to do that.
Yes, I had told her, absolutely told her not to do that.
At this point, I'm
right.
I'm like, my kid is gonna die. She is out there shooting heroin, and she's gonna die. So I asked you, I want to go, and I'm gonna physically take her out. And you're like, don't do it, because if she's not ready, there's nothing you're gonna be able to do. And I went to the Parkinson's house that night, and I said, and Ken's a cop, and I said, this is where my kid is. Can you do anything? Can you send the cops in? Can you bust up the joint? And he said, well, we're watching, but there's really nothing we can do. And I said, well, I just can't wait any longer. I gotta go. I have to do something. I can't do nothing anymore. And Santana and I showed up on the street outside of her apartment. And I'm standing on the street, talking to everybody that walked by, hey, you want to go shoot heroin with Bridget Murnane? Bridget's up there. We're gonna shoot. Bridget, we're here. Where we go one, we go all. If you're going to go down, we're all going down together. Either you're coming out or Santana and I are coming in to get you. And Santana's crying and she's like, you're not my sister anymore unless you come out of that house. I mean, it was just a shit show of just desperation.
Did you come out of the house that night?
Yeah.
Yeah, and tell them to
I told her to
get the hell out
shut
of
the
there.
F up, and I said they're gonna kill you.
Right.
Because you're out here talking about heroin in front of my dealer's house. Like,
Right.
you can't do
this
that.
This is not a good thing
this is
for
not
you.
where
That's
you
right.
should be talking about that.
And was it the next day that you went, that we took you to rehab, or it was shortly after that?
It was the
correct?
next
It was
day.
the very next day.
The next day.
Because I told her, and I was like, if you just fucking leave, I will go tomorrow, but you need to get out of here. Yeah.
And so then I took you to rehab.
Yeah.
Right? Did I come get you, or did you
did.
come to? I came and got you.
You
and,
picked her up right there at that
right there.
house.
And I remember that. Well, my recollection of that trip, you were a mess. Like, I was really worried about you. You obviously were physically and emotionally drained, and it was funny because I saw in that moment of time that switch in you, that real defeated, like, I got to do this. I can't. This is going to kill me if I don't. Like, I get it. And I'm not sure that when you were talking to me on the way over that you were necessarily ready, but it was obvious that you were like, I can't keep living like this. Is going to kill me. So I remember dropping you off at rehab that day and leaving you. And obviously you flourished in rehab that time, or did the stuff that you had to. And then when you were ready to get out of rehab, there was this idea of either coming home or going to a recovery house. Is that right?
Yep. So there was the thought process of, I'm like, well, in my mind, I wanted to go home, but at the same time, I was like, you know what, whatever my counselor at this point tells me, I think her name was Danielle, she was wonderful, I had her both times. And I'm like, whatever you want me to do is what I'll do. So there was a girl who was there with me who's like, oh, I'm going to the Mary DeVoe house, which is here in Plattsburgh. And she's from Vermont, and I'm like, oh, maybe that's a good idea. So we looked into that. At that point, Mary DeVoe didn't have any options open. Mom was not keen on me coming home, as much as I was like, well, if I'm in a sober house, like, at least I'm not staying with you. I'll have a little structure. So she was kind of there, but not really. She really didn't want me to come home. And then there was a girl from Portland who was there, and she had told my counselor about this incredibly structured program up in Portland, Maine. And the stars kind of all aligned. They had a bed open. And we had made arrangements for Mom to pick me up from rehab, bring me home so I could pack my stuff, and then we left for Portland less than 48 hours after I left rehab.
How long did you live in the house in Portland?
So I probably should have lived in the house a little longer. I probably lived there 7 or 8 months. I lived in that sober house. And the reason that I had moved out is because she had multiple houses, and she was renting this one, and her lease was up, and she's like, I'm not going to renew it. I just don't have the people. So I ended up moving out around 8 months. Ideally, I would have liked to stay in sober living around a year, but it worked out fine. I found a sober roommate, and it was cool. But about 8 months.
You did get involved, I think, in probably 12-step programs up there, and without violating the traditions, we'll just say that I think you did when you were in Portland, right?
Yep, I did. That was one of the requirements of the house, was to attend 12-step.
Yep. And did you, and then after you wound up in the business, right? Didn't you and somebody that you were sober with up there bought or operated a sober house, right?
Yep, so I started off working at the Portland Recovery Community Center as, I don't even remember my title, but I worked there, and that was really great. And then another woman in recovery and I opened up a sober house Rain was born in 2016. I opened up 2017, and we opened a 16-bed woman sober house in Portland. It was wonderful.
Good
Really
for
nice.
you. So, yeah, baby Rain, that was boy meets girl in recovery campus. We're in love. We're going to run off together, blah, blah, blah. Decide to have a kid. Is that kind of how that all transpired?
I wouldn't say we're going to run off in love, but, I was a year and a half into recovery. I had been living on my own for a while. I had a car. I had kind of all this stuff. I had a job. For the most part, my relationships with my family were starting to be on the mend. And I had this idea, and I told my sponsor, and I said, hey, there's this new kid in recovery. What do you think? And she goes, I wouldn't do it. And I'm like, why not? She goes, it's just not smart. And I'm like, okay, I think I'm gonna do it. And she goes, what if you end up pregnant? And I'm like, that won't happen. I ended up pregnant.
Funny how those people who come before us kind of know what's going to happen. Isn't
Weird
that great?
how they
Yeah.
knew that was happening.
Yeah.
But and then I had Rain, and those were a couple rough years navigating that. Her father was using for most of her life. He recently just got sober about a year and a half ago. But she's been the biggest blessing that I've had, I think, in recovery.
I think everybody knows that I'm not necessarily enamored with kids, but I absolutely love your child.
She's
She
cool.
is just very, very cool. And
We
I
like
have
her.
pictures of her in my office, and she's cool as hell.
Can we back up for a minute about kind of your early recovery? And I know that the moment of, when you ended up pregnant, but prior to that, for me, the recovery community that she developed, the recovery support system that I think that you had at that time, you had a really good group of people that were all in recovery and doing really well. It was really wonderful to see as a parent, to see your kid have this group of friends that were really, I think everybody was really kind of pulling in the same direction, and you were doing fun things, you were participating in all of what Portland had to offer. I mean, Portland's a wonderful community. There were a lot of great activities. I felt like you were really had found a place that you belonged, and you had people around you, and as a parent, that was just so, I don't know, it was relieving. But I felt good about what you were doing in your life and where you were going and the people you were spending your time with. It was a neat place.
It's funny. Before you do that, you also came back here and gave me, I think, my 25-year medallion at a meeting. Is that right?
I did.
Was it 25 years? Yes. And that was one of the most special anniversaries, recovery anniversaries I had, because I don't have children, so I never, I didn't see my kid go through this and then get sober. So you're the closest, and I've always kind of appointed myself as, one of your adopted fathers, and so that was like a highlight for me to have you come back and know that I was part of it. But one of the things that I wanted to say to you, and then I want to talk about recovery, is that you did something for me that you probably don't recognize, and that was when I watched what you did in the end of your active using to your mother and your sister and your family. It really brought me back to how when we're addicts and in the height of addiction, we will do anything and harm anybody to get high. And I don't think I realized the damage that I had done to my family, even though I'd been sober 20 plus years. Like it really rang true to me when I saw it through the eyes of somebody that I was so close to. So, I'm appreciative of that, because it's made me try to be a better family member, to recognize that I really took a lot from my family. And I'm not trying to make it bad. I'm just saying, it was, when I saw it that way, it was really, an intriguing thing. And one of the other things that I've always marveled at about you is you never let recovery stop you from doing the things that you wanted to do. You're a concert goer, you travel, you do things. And I think I'd love you to talk a bit about that, because I think that's so important for people to recognize that life doesn't end when you get in recovery. It can be a beginning, and you can still go and have fun doing all the things that we did before. I mean, I think you've seen more Fish shows than I have now, quite honestly, although I did see my fair amount in the early days. So
83.
Yeah, you're way more. you're way more than
83?
me.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to me a little bit about recovery and how just
Right?
what recovery life's been like for you.
So it's been a journey in so many different ways. We started in Portland, and you start within that first year. And for me, that first year was really easy. I was in a new place, didn't know where to get drugs. Come to find out, drugs are much more accessible in Portland than they are in Plattsburgh.
Sure.
But I didn't know the people to go to, didn't know the places to go to, and it was easy because I was away from all of my stressors. I had made new friends, new connections, and life was easy. And then things started to get a little harder, and real life starts to come in. You start to get the job. Oh, I have to pay these back taxes for these 3 years that I haven't done or whatever. But it's this constant journey of evolving who you are and adapting to the world around you. And thankfully, I had friends that have been my constant friends since I was probably 6 or 7 months. Like my friend Tom, who is my absolute best friend, and I just adore him.
I think he came here, didn't he? I met him. Did I not?
Tom.
I met one of your friends.
Tom or Tommy? There's two different ones.
I don't remember
Tom
which one.
Tom is in his 50s.
Yeah, he was older.
Bald.
I can't remember. Well, it was the guy's name was Tom. I'm
Yeah.
sure when he came here and I met him. Seemed
Tom's
like a
an
great guy. Yep.
amazing,
Yeah,
amazing guy.
He's just one of my favorite humans on this planet, and someone who is just with me through everything, through my pregnancy, through birth, through everything. And recovery just always looks so different. And you talked a little bit about fun in recovery. So when I was using, I went to a bunch of Fish shows, went to a bunch of concerts, got high the whole time, and had a great time, I guess, quote unquote. It took me a while to want to go to Fish shows again, because I knew when I listened to the music, I was like, okay, I feel home, this feels normal, but I didn't know how I was going to react with all the pot smoking, all the drugs, all of this. And then one day I just decided, like, I'm just going to go. We're just going to go. We're going to figure it out. We're going to have a good time. And there is a yellow balloon group for Fish, a place where people who choose to live or choose to go to shows drug and alcohol free. So it's a recovery group of people who love Fish. And when I found that, I was like, oh shit, we're gonna go all the time now, because I know there's people like me who are at these Fish shows. And aside from being around people in recovery and, you know, that feeling of home and like I'm just home and I have these people, Fish is the other place that I just feel home. I look around and I see thousands and thousands of people who are there because we love this band who sings about, you know, nothing but everything all at the same time.
Yeah, that part for me has always been cool, and I think it's important that younger people speak about being able to have fun and live in recovery. It's not, oftentimes people think it's this thing where I have to be sitting in my room all day thinking about how I don't get high, and it's not really about that. It's like kind of living this life that is what I wanted to live before. You know, it's funny you talk about that. I've been to a lot of concerts, both high and not high, and I remember the ones now. Like, I remember the fun that I had. A lot of the other ones, I remember that, you know, I fell off the stool or whatever, you know what I mean? So I go down and listen to the music. So, you know, that's kind of cool.
So in addition to, you know, going to concerts, I mean, for you to jump in a car with a bunch of your friends and go to Florida, both friends that are in recovery and now friends that are not, for you to have, you know, your life has kind of taken on its own, you know, its own kind of meaning, purpose, and direction. I mean, you really, you know, she really is just living, I think, you know, this really beautiful life with a, you know, an assortment of different people and influences, all in your world, and you're doing it really, just doing it so well.
All right, so let's get to one of the most important things that happened in your life. 3, 4, 5 years ago, you might not 2 years ago, you were home visiting, and you were talking to people, and you were kind of, I think, a little bit uncomfortable in Portland. You had the baby. It was a struggle. It was all those things. So you were toying with the idea of coming home, I believe. Is this a fair assessment? And I think you probably talked to some people. I might have been one of them, and
yes.
We talked about coming home. And I don't remember what I said, but I think I said something along the lines of, it was the hardest thing I ever did in recovery, moving to a new place, and I would probably caution you against it. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
So what
that's
was
pretty accurate.
So what happened with the whole move? Because I know that was big for you.
Yeah. So my daughter was 3. We had been living in Portland for 3 years. I'd been there for about 5, and I was a single parent. I was living in a communal housing with 12 other people, which was fantastic, and it was lovely. But Portland rents were so high, that was the only way she and I could really afford to live in Portland. And I didn't have any help. I didn't have any of my family. My daughter was still too young that my friends were like, I don't want to break her. I don't want to change her diaper. You know, they weren't at that point where she's like fun and she can go, not that she wasn't fun, but she wasn't old enough to really start to enjoy for people who may not have liked kids. So I felt like I didn't have a ton of support with my kid. I hadn't showered by myself in 3 years. You know, any time that I needed a break, I had to drive 5 hours to drop her off with my mom so I could have, you know, a couple-day break. And it was starting to get to me, and it was starting to become really overwhelming being a parent. And my dad had been telling me for years since I'd had Rain, no, just come home, we'll help, you know, it'll be good, you know, she'll be around family, you'll be around family. Whereas my mother said, don't ever come home, we don't want you here. wait. Oh. You know, you have your friends up in Portland, I think it's best you stay. I guess how I heard it was that she didn't want me here, but.
Which was not my message at all. My message was in support of you, the recovery community, and really this life that you had there that you really were very happy with.
In fairness to your mom, you know, I was probably a pretty big driving force behind that, because I'd seen it happen so many times where people who got clean and sober with this group of people, we become very dependent on them, and we go to a new town, and even though there's great people here, they're not the same. It's not Tommy, and it's not the people that you met up there, and it's not the people that you went through all the early struggles with, so it's really easy to become disconnected, and that's the worry. You always worry about that, And so that's what a lot of it was. It wasn't that, obviously we love having you here and loved having your daughter here. I mean, it's great, but it was, I was scared. I was like, I've seen this thing happen a lot of times over the years that I've been sober. So we were worried about you. And you know what? I think if I were saying to you, obviously it hasn't been an easy road since you've come home, but you've done pretty well since you've gotten here, you know? I mean, I think, right?
I think so. I think our relationship has gotten significantly better since I moved home. I think the 5 years that I lived in Portland, we were always okay, but we didn't know really how to communicate effectively. I think when you would say something, I would take really offense to it, or when I kind of came back with our sarcastic tone, which I meant to be funny, you would get upset because you thought I was being mean. Our communication level was horrible. And I think over the past couple years, you and I have really learned how to communicate effectively in ways that works for our relationship. So I think that's one bonus to moving home. My daughter is super happy, although my daughter does constantly say, "Mom, when are we moving back to Maine?" I don't know at this point if my mom would let my daughter move back to Maine.
Right, yeah, I think you're probably right, Bridge. You're probably not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah, it probably wasn't the best decision for me to move back if I'm looking long term, looking at my happiness, looking at all of that. It definitely wasn't the right decision to move home, but you know, we deal with the decisions that we make in recovery, and you know, things are okay. My kid is happy. I have a pretty good life. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And you know, sometimes you just have to be grateful for the things that you have, and it's not always going to be perfect.
I think that you know, it's funny. We all make decisions in our life, and one of the things about it is nobody's ever going to tell you what to do. You know, we were talking earlier about what could somebody have done for you earlier, and I coincidentally agree with you, probably very little. And even today, I'll get great advice from people, but I'm going to make the decisions that I'm going to make, and sometimes they're going to turn out bad for me, and as long as I'm willing to pay the consequences or whatever it is, then I'm willing to do that. And I think that's what you did. And you know, recovery is about living. It's about saying, this is what's in my best interest right now, and so yeah, I think that you did fine. Did you want to ask her something?
So I just kind of wanted to talk about this because I think this is an interesting transition point for people in recovery when you're trying to make a big decision about am I going to change where I'm living? Am I going to go? You going home, you didn't give up this community of people, but your relationships changed, and you kind of had to replace those group of relationships with you know, really your family, which has become, you know, kind of the foundation of where you spend your time. Where in Portland, the foundation of where you spent your time were these people that were in recovery, that you had this really great connection. Kind of your whole rebirth was with these people, and I think you're right. I think we've had an opportunity to have some you know, full immersion. I mean, you live 2 streets behind me, and so we're close enough, and we spend a little bit of time together. Sometimes we spend a lot of bit of time, but we have an opportunity just because it's easy and convenient to spend time. Plus, I think we like to do some of the same things, and absolutely love having you and your daughter here, and yet I do see what you've had to give up to be home. I see where those relationships are still so foundational to you and who you are, and that's a hard piece to not have in your back pocket, in your backyard, as your kind of your everyday bit of connection to you know, things that are foundational to you. So I appreciate you being here.
So when you got back here, you now work at Alliance for Positive Health, is that right? So talk to me a little about the job. It's kind of in the recovery field, although not exactly. Is it?
Sort of, kind of. We definitely talk about recovery in the class that I teach. So I go into all of the prisons in upstate New York. So Clinton, Franklin, Altona, Upstate, Bear Hill, Adirondack. There's 6. And I go in and I teach a 30-session course on HIV, STDs, hepatitis C, risk reduction, all of that stuff. And when we talk a little bit about risk reduction, we also go in and talk a little bit about recovery, especially in the new modules that we're teaching. And I go in and I teach the incarcerated individuals about these topics. They take a test at the end, they give a presentation, and then they can go on and teach the other incarcerated individuals about that as well.
Are you enjoying doing that?
I love my job.
I know you do.
I really love my job. And that's the other thing. If I were to ever move back to Portland, I'd have to give up this job, and that's tough because I really love my job, and
I can see.
It brings me joy.
I can see you being really good at it. You have that kind of personality. Your mom used gregarious. You do, and I think that's important in that kind of arena. Plus, you have a toughness about you. Like you're not in a jail appearing like you're worried about anything. You have the ability to handle yourself. So, what's on the horizon for Bridget Murnane? What do you? I mean. And I actually want to ask you two questions before we wrap this up. So first off, you were a practicing Catholic. You did a lot of that stuff. Did you go back when you got sober to the Catholic Church or do any of that kind of stuff? Or did you just stay away from it and say, I'm all done with that?
No, I did not go back to being a practicing Catholic. I have found my faith to be more in spirituality and the fact that whatever is out there is constantly evolving, and I no longer have to put a face or a name to it. I don't have to have Jesus Christ as, this is my God. And it changes just like I do. Just as humans we're evolving, how do we not expect the spirit that's taking care of us to also be evolving? So no, I did not go back to being a practicing Catholic.
That seems to be a pretty normal kind of thing in people in recovery. Some go back. Some decide that they want the kind of structure to that. Most of us find it, not most of us, I shouldn't say that, but a lot of us find it differently. But we all seem to find it somewhere. And I think you're right. We use the term spirituality more than the term, religion or any of that kind of stuff. It's this, spiritual life that I'm on.
Are you suggesting that, and purely for clarification?
I'm suggesting that you're probably not very spiritual because you're not in
Talk about it.
So.
Really? I want some clarity for people that may be paying attention. So what I hear both of you saying is that there is some foundation to long-term recovery, that you do need to become connected to some form of spirituality. And I don't mean to speak for everybody, but people that we know that are successful have found some connection to spirit. Long-term success have found some connection to spirituality in their recovery.
So I'd be interested in what Bridget says, but I would stop short of saying you have to. I would say that it worked for me. It certainly has helped me, but I know people who have decided that that's not a path that they want to go, and they've done well in recovery. Is that kind of your take as well?
Yeah, agreed. There were several people up in Portland who kind of didn't preach that they didn't, have that kind of spirituality, but definitely when it came up in conversation, because, the higher power spirituality comes up a lot, there are people that say, that just wasn't for me. I found other outlets and other things that I have a connection to. So it really is dependent on the person. Like recovery isn't one size fits all. So for people to be able, and that's the beautiful thing about it. There's so much autonomy to be able to do with what you want.
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple of principles for recovery that no matter what you do, you have to have. I think one of them is you got to be able to be honest with yourself. If you're honest with yourself, that's one. The other is connection to people, and it doesn't necessarily need to always be other people who are exactly like you, but good family connections, good friends. We need people. Like we count on, as much as I think in the days of your addiction you were a loner, as I was. We don't like to be alone. We're that's one of those things, like isolation is what this disease breeds, and so we crave that isolation when we're using, but truthfully we need people, and we like being around people when we get into recovery.
Very accurate.
So what's on Bridget Murnane's horizon? What's the rest? How old are you now? 29?
29. I
Knocking
turned
on the
30.
door.
Oh boy, you've reached it, Bridge. You've reached it.
But I hear that the 30s are better than your 20s, but I think that's just people in their 30s saying that. So.
Well, the 50s are better than
go.
your 30s, and pretty soon the 60s
Almost
are going to be better than
60s.
your 40s.
There we go.
I know, it's so funny. I feel so old when I'm around you. Like, you're 29 and I've been sober for 30 years. Like, it really is just like, I don't know how to figure that. So what do you, if you could wave a magic wand, what's life look like for you in the next 10, 15, 20 years?
Oh my God, my daughter will be 15 in high school. That's not a wave of a magic wand. That is going to happen.
Right, yes, she is going to make it there.
So she'll, my kid will be happy, and we'll have found our own happiness together, as a family, wherever that is and whatever that looks like. I hope to, once COVID's over, to be doing a little more traveling with her. I have goals for her and I traveling together and going to some national parks, hitting all the aquariums, because that's like our thing we do together. I don't know that I want to project 10 years in the future, because I think it's a lot of pressure. But I think we just want to be happy.
That's the best answer I could have asked from you. You know, one of the things is I used to spend time trying to figure out exactly where my life's going to be. And now I look at it and go, you know what, I want to be healthy, I want to be happy, I want to be okay. And as long as those things happen in my life, everything else is gravy. You know, money, prestige, power, all those things, yeah, they're cool, but they really have very little to do with the happiness in life. You know, happiness comes from relationships and those types of things. So I'm very proud of you, and I'm like I said, I love your sister. Your sister is fabulous, but you're my favorite.
Thank you.
And
Aww.
you probably and
Warms my heart. She does know it.
She knows it. I've even told her. I said, "I'm sorry, Santana, I love you, but yeah, I'm sorry, you don't get to be the favorite." And I think one day she said to me, "Well, if I go out and shoot heroin for 6 years and go to rehab, will I be the favorite?" And I'm like, "Well, let's not. No, you can
not
be
do
like
that.
That's dramatic.
you're
We don't
fine
need to
being
do
the
that.
second. You don't need to do that to be the favorite." So thank you for coming. Anything you want to add? Random thoughts about recovery? Anything that or you don't have to. I just, you know.
So I don't think I really have anything to add. I want to thank you guys for having me on your podcast. My daughter and I are both longtime listeners. We listen to every one, and she just loves hearing Uncle Mike and Yaya in the radio. She always says, "Is Yaya here? Is Uncle Mike here? Where are they?"
That's so awesome. That's so cool.
I appreciate that you guys have put this podcast out, and I think it's very beneficial for a lot of people, and you guys really do a great job, so thank you.
Great.
Aw,
Thank you for
thanks,
coming. And
Bridge.
maybe in a year or two, we'll have you come back if we're still on the air, and we'll get an update on where you are and how Rain's doing, and yeah, we'll see what happens. Betsy, do you have anything else you want to add?
I always have something to say. Right?
Well, yes.
So, thank you for inviting Bridget.
Wait, can I just poll the audience before we close, though? I think I said like 3 or 4 really nice things about Betsy today, right?
Several.
Did
yes.
I, right?
Yes.
I really did. Like, I want it to be known that I did. Okay, so go ahead.
And
You
I
can have the floor back now.
Thank you so much for doing that. I want to thank you for thinking of Bridget. You know, we wanted to talk about youth and recovery at this podcast, and you know what a better example than one that is you know, intimate and personal to both of us, because this is my kid. I mean, here she is, and I wanted to comment that. This morning I was sitting down and I was trying to craft some notes about things that I wanted to be prepared to talk about, and one of the most curious things that came out of it is that heroin and heroin are two, what is that called when 2 words, what's it called?
Homophone.
A homophone?
H-O-M-O-P-H-O-N.
Well, whatever thank you
Wicked
for that.
Smart.
Go,
Bridget's
Brinny.
wicked smart.
She's right, too.
And so
You guys would be lost without Bryn.
we would.
know.
We'd be
So
lost
lost
without
without
Bryn. We'd be
Wicked
lost
smart.
without Telly, but
Good
you know, we
God.
love super
If you guys
smart
ever need to
people.
go on strike.
Whoa, easy there, cowgirl. So what came to my mind was, you know, heroin was this debilitating part of who you are, and yet when I look at you and I see you as a heroine, this kind of courageous, strong, you know, mighty woman that I do. This is how I see you, and you're a beautiful inspiration to your daughter and people around you, and I'm so very proud of you. So I think about this heroine, like this is my heroine that is right here, that, you know, and I'm really I really am proud of you every day for all. You're an amazing mom. You're just a great human being that has just grown, and I love your passion, and I love your fight and your feist, and I love you, and I am so proud of you. So thank you for coming here, because it does take courage to show up in front of a camera with people and talk about the things that you did, and so thank you for that. I love you.
Love you, too. Thank you.
And I would echo thank you. And as we wrap this up, you know, it is an interesting what? Oh, you want to see my sweat? What? I'm gonna show you my shirt, Telly. Don't worry. It is an interesting dynamic when you bring a mother and daughter together, and there's obviously history. And we may actually have my father come on and you know, interview him too. He's thinking about doing it, and you know, I think what we try to do here is be a little bit raw and have people come on here and be willing to talk about stuff that can be very hard. It's these are not easy topics, and so I'm very thankful, and please visit our website, mhab.org. Check out the marketplace. If you need help, please reach out to one of the places that can help you. MHAB is one of many. People in recovery do have a great deal of fun, and we're try to be incredibly helpful to other people that struggle with this. So if you're watching this and you have some troubles, understand that you can come in here at any time. Doesn't matter how old, how young you are, doesn't matter how long you used, and you can get a life like Bridget has or like I have, and really be enjoying what's going on. And so we hope that you do that. With that said, thanks again, Bridget.
Thank you.
COVID out.
Wait, we got to talk about your shirt. We're not done. It's not COVID.
Not COVID out. So this week for my special shirt, I have one. Why don't you read it? So they may not see it.
Before you try to hurt my feelings, please keep in mind, I probably don't have any, and you probably do. So factual, so factual.
So that is my caustic sweatshirt, and I hide behind this little air of caustictivity or whatever it is. Caustictivity. But I think everybody knows that I'm a pretty sensitive guy at my core, and so this sweatshirt's probably not truthful, but I need to wear it anyway to keep this image up. So now we're going to close this podcast and say COVID out. See you next week.
Thanks for joining us today at Recovery Uncovered. No matter where you are in your recovery journey, or if you're supporting the recovery journey of a loved one, just know today is the first day of the rest of your life. Visit our website at mhab.org.
And if you want to become an old-timer in recovery, don't use and don't die. This has been Recovery Uncovered.